My name is Mercedes Cooper, and I am the Executive Vice President of Array. I want to welcome you here to this gathering on behalf of Array founder Ava DuVernay, our president Telaine Jones, and our whole team at Array. But before we start, I would love to bring forth Sister Jocelyn Jackson, hailing from Wichita, Kansas, and the Bay, to open our convening.
Thank you, Mercedes. I really appreciate that. All that you shared to get us to this present moment. And I'm grateful that you asked me to sing a blessing for this space. And this blessing I'm about to sing, I actually did sing where Eric Garner was killed. I sang it in Baltimore, in Cleveland. I've visited many of these places where people's breath was taken. And so I'm grateful I get to sing it as a blessing for our conversation. Last night I had a dream about a home that was so right. I don't know why it has to be a dream. Why can't I? When will I? Lord, help me. Help me find a home. Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't be dismayed. Don't be dismayed. Deep in your heart, you must believe everything is gonna be all right. Everything is gonna be all right. Everything is gonna be all right today.
Thank you. In 2020, more than 200 Black lives were taken by police force. Of those lives, at least 107 were killed before May. On May 26, 2020, police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Officers Jay Alexander and Thomas Lane knelt on Mr. Floyd's back to help restrain Mr. Floyd as he died, and Officer Tutau stood by without intervention. On May 26, 2020, Mr. Floyd said, "I can't breathe," more than 20 times. Array's founder, Ava, really thought about what she could do as an artist to confront the continued cycle of police brutality that in too many instances occurs in Black and brown communities. And after witnessing George Floyd's recorded murder, that is when the idea of LEAP came to fruition. LEAP is the Law Enforcement Accountability Project that at its core is dedicated to empowering activists as they pursue narrative change around the police abuse of Black people. And LEAP's mission is to disrupt the code of silence that exists around police brutality and elevate activist storytelling by funding 9 projects in film, photography, fine art, music, poetry, culinary arts, and dance. The fund was powered by hundreds of advocates who believe in police transparency and visibility. And anyone who donated or supported this initiative, we thank you. I had the privilege of, I would say, shepherding LEAP and working directly with each and every artist, and it was really one of the best experiences of my work life. Today, it brings me so much joy because I'm looking at a screen and I'm looking at all of the LEAP commissioned artists gathered here to reflect on this thing that we built. We mourned during that time, but we also celebrated the beauty of our people, our legacies, our histories, our creativity, and that's how I'll always remember LEAP, and that's how I'm going to remember all of our artists. So With that being said, before we begin our conversation, which I'm excited to reintroduce or introduce, depending on if you've seen the projects or not, the artists in these projects to everyone who may be watching. So I want to go in the order in which we sent out our signal and said, "Will you hold hands with us on this journey?" And so I'm actually going to start with Steve Irby.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It's been a minute, so happy to see everybody. It's crazy. It's been 5 years for the anniversary of the LEAP program. It's like this weird sense of it feels like forever ago, but at the same time, it's like 2 weeks ago. So I'm just really honored and still really grateful to be a part of this whole initiative in the first place. So forever grateful for that. But that being said, my name is Stephen John Irby. Sorry to give you the full government. I'm a photographer and also the co-founder of Street Dreams Magazine, and also I'm a born and raised New Yorker. Go Knicks all day. And the project that I was honored to work on with Ava Array in the LEAD program was telling the story and shedding light on the incident of police brutality in the most excessive way, actually, to the brother Amadou Diallo and the effects of his family and just the effects of that in general for the whole community. That story is still something that I do truly hold deep to my heart because, I mean, I grew up in that era. You know, I couldn't have been more than a teenager at that point. So for the weight of that story and then just the effect of it and being given the responsibility to tell that story and find a way to bring awareness to it and also just shed light to just the gravity of that situation was something that is truly one of the biggest honors that I've had in my career so far, and something that I truly hold dearly to my heart because of not only being a born and raised New Yorker, but also being given this opportunity to tell this story in a responsible way from Ava and the Array team.
Hey everybody, it's so good to see everybody. My name is WJ Lofton. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. My project was What You Kill God 2, a poetic visual. I'm a writer, visual artist, and I was able to create a film basically just celebrating the life of Breonna Taylor.
My name is Jocelyn Jackson. I'm from Kansas, and also right now living in East Oakland and celebrating the Bay Area every day. I am grateful that Array family found me as a culinary artist to provide an experience that honors the life of Philando Castile and tells this story that is so deep and wide about how we lost him in a way that we can continue to remember, and for me to set a table that acknowledges both the harm and the redemption that's possible when we keep telling the story from Philando's perspective.
My name is Rare Valverde from New York, and I joined Leap Project to write an original song entitled Safe Where on behalf of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. It was written and composed by myself and another gentleman named Anthony Michael. And it was a beautiful experience, but I have to say now that I'm hearing Jocelyn, I'm mad it wasn't a duet. So, Jocelyn, I'll be reaching out to you for something else. But I was really honored to join this project and to be a part of such a beautiful link of artists. It's just been amazing to see how we all contributed to this project. So thank you again.
Hi, I'm Delita Martin. I am a printmaker, visual artist from Huffman, Texas. My project was a mural project celebrating the life of and telling the story of Yvette Smith of Bastrop, Texas. It was titled Blue is the Color We See Before We Die. I was honored to be a part of this project, and it was very difficult from one perspective, but very necessary and eye-opening. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the group.
My name is Reggie Black. I'm from Washington, D.C. I can be found kind of skirting all over the world every now and then, like all of us creative entrepreneurs. I'm honored to be here. I can't believe it's been 5 years. When I saw the email, I was like, wait, what? Like, man. So I'm honored to be here. I agree with you, Mercedes. It's a blessing to be able to see all of us in one space. And I think I had the privilege of making a collection of all of our works because my project was how many weren't filmed. It was a billboard on the corner of Sunset and La Brea, and I think what it was a public installation, public calling. My medium is through typography, creating original hand typography. So to see that messaging and public messaging and kind of using branding and marketing, but really thought-provoking messaging to kind of raise awareness to this was probably like, one of my dreams come true. So honored to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francesca Harper, and I am a dancer, choreographer, filmmaker, multi hyphenated artist, and the artistic director of the Ailey 2 Company. My work blends movement and storytelling to really honor legacy and the future. The piece that I created was called The Reckoning, and it was created in honor of Ayanna Jones, who was a young girl who was killed by an officer who had, I guess, cameras, who was also on a reality television show. We created a piece that I really felt was important to give voice to women of color and who have been erased and made invisible by and to the system and to the communities. And so it was one of the most powerful and important and enriching projects I've had to date.
Hello, everybody. I'm Julian Steffen. I'm from New York. I am a multi-hyphenated audiovisual recording artist. And my project was The Aura, and it focused on the case of Elijah McClain. I was really honored to have been able to blend all of my storytelling abilities to kind of focus on this case, and I'm just grateful to be here, and it's really nice to meet everybody in space, and I've been really happy to be here.
Hey family, Silas. I'm a designer, artist, one of the co-founders of Polymode, which is a design studio that does publication design, identity design, all kinds of design across the cultural sphere. And I'm really moved also seeing everyone's faces because, kind of like Reggie, I had like a synthetic act. At Polymode, we designed a publication called The Fiction of Protection that captured everyone's work here, and including your beautiful portraits. So it's good to see you like vivid in 4D, not just 2D. But our job was to create a visual aesthetic, not only to hold all of your works, but also texts, a curator's introduction, a statement from Ava and Mercedes, as well as a timeline and data visualization to represent the weight of all the lives that were taken, and express all of that into a material publication, which we can't wait to have be printed. And it was just like an honor to really digest everyone's work, and the power of the collective effort in this group really blows me away. And I'm still really moved thinking about our experience of designing that.
When I reflect on your projects, I often group you together in terms of like how does each project live in conversation with others. So I have some questions for you individually, but I kind of put them under the banner of these groupings that I have for you in my mind. So WJ and Rare, for me, what I identify as sort of the breath projects that I also really closely relate to George Floyd and, his, not being able to breathe. And so using kind of that voice as an instrument for the change through your words and such is kind of how I put you in conversation. So I want to start with WJ, just in terms of the I don't know if it's cadence that narrates this beautiful visual poem and the imagery that you have. just from like even a craft point of view, how do you approach using breath and pacing like in your performance?
Yeah. So first, I would like to say thank you for just being my thought partner during that process. I think I was trying to figure it out because I wanted to do justice to the work, and you really were just kind and intentional and thoughtful in your feedback. So I just want to say thank you first. And just the breadth of the work really just comes from me wanting the listener to really sit with the words, to sit with the language, to truly understand that someone's life is not here anymore. This Black woman's life was extinguished, and I really wanted to drive that point home. And so each word was, I wanted to be very intentional, very punctuated. I wanted people to think about the breath that exists in their body and no longer existed in Breonna Taylor's body.
How do you decide when to evoke emotion and urgency through sort of the rhythm and the movements, and then aligning that also with the imagery as well? Do you think about it, or does it just kind of like you just piece it together?
So in this project, the meter was built from rage. I was just angry. I was just mad. And I didn't come from it from a technical point initially. I just was so enraged that what I was feeling, I just wrote. And I was saying it out loud to myself. And I was like, yeah, Breonna Taylor, some women would not arrive in the springtime to lay in the bluegrass of Kentucky. It was just the truth. She was murdered, I think, 6 days before spring. And it was just me honoring what the material reality of the situation was.
Was that the first line that came to you that you wrote? Did you write linear, or was that the first line or not? What was the first
It wasn't linear. So it was pretty lengthy. And then I think we slashed through a
We
lot.
did. We sure did.
We slashed through a lot. But I think that's the line that sticks with me. Because I think about just being able to enjoy spring. Just like this season where everything is blooming, and then we have this juxtaposition of someone's life ending. And that was the line, and I'm thinking about the bluegrass, this music. She was not only able to not lay in the grass, but she was not able to lay in the music of her home. She was robbed of all these things. And I just really wanted to speak to the tremendous loss.
I have anecdotes about like each of you and your projects and the shaping of them. But for you, I remember you had done a visual poem and a poem in honor of Breonna Taylor previously. But I think with this one, it was you had to reframe your mind and trying to channel that rage, because your first one was like literally to honor her and uplift her. And you were like, now I got to talk about these police officers. How's that gonna work? You know what I mean? How's that gonna work? But you figured it out. It's beautiful. You did it.
You helped me think through that, because that was a barrier, and I think that I was stuck on being so angry. But I think you helped me problem solve around like, how do you not only like celebrate someone's life, but how do you call for accountability? And so names must be announced in the air so other people can receive those names and know those names and not let them rest.
Yeah.
So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Rare. My anecdote about you is, Rare, you wrote like 3 songs. This wasn't even the first song. Like, and I'm not just talking about line changes. I'm talking about a different person. I'm talking about a whole different song, tempo, lyrics, etc., etc., etc. They were all beautiful, but then we have this one as well. So I see it as sort of like that lyrical architecture where you gracefully embraced each and every one of those songs. All of them can be released. But when you're approaching music, one of the things I was wondering about you, does the lyrics or the melody come first? Like, where do you sit yourself to be able to like be like, okay, it was this, now it's this, now it needs to be this?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mercedes, because like WJ said, you also pulled me in as well and talked me through each phase of this project. But to answer that question, I have to be really honest. I had to really pull myself together to participate in this project, mainly because of the timing. And I don't know if I can speak for anybody else, but I was exhausted. I can cry right now thinking about it. Just exhausted at the stories, the details, the amount of times it was happening. And I was also questioning for myself, how do I participate in this without being so angry and by being authentic? And I really didn't know how to participate at that time. So the timing of this project, or my participation in this project, was perfect because it pulled me together selfishly. But to that point, I think I approached those first two songs in a manner of just being busy. And usually my process is to, one, think about the project, but also pull in the players, get studio time, musicians. And I found myself being busy with that work and not really thinking about what I was doing. So I think it was so perfect that the song that we did land on really allowed me to be still and really think about what I was writing. And it caused me to pretty much X out everyone else that I had in mind to participate and just bring it to myself, do it in my home, do it by myself, record it by myself. It was really important for me to do that so that I really understood what I was writing about and what I was trying to get across.
Speaking to that too, this kind of goes into my next question because, Black people, we have like a history of sort of like these protest songs, right? Some might even say anthems, right? Where, if that comes on, this or, about our history. And so, we were like, when we were thinking about a collection of different artwork, music, we definitely knew we wanted to tap into a musician to create a song. And we were like, oh yeah, Leap needs an anthem. And so that's what we were thinking. But you came in and your voice is like very soothing, your voice is very soothing. It's got that low, and it kind of became a lullaby to me when I listened to it, in a sense where it's not like hard hitting. It's not like, in your face, like, I can name a lot of different, conjure a lot of different artists and things over the decades of, being in the streets and marching to and things of that nature, or music videos, of my generation that were kind of like those protest songs. But like your voice carries such a vulnerability and a strength in the lyrics that it kind of, it's like a balance to the story that is actually being told. I don't know how you do that. That's my question.
Well, I think that only came across because of the process in which I recorded it. Like I said, I was literally getting players, horns, keys, organs, and just going through this whole thing and not really thinking about what I was writing. And in order for me to really be vulnerable enough and find that space, I had to like strip it down. So I literally came in my house. I have a little booth that I have in my house. It was pitch black in here. And I just had to record it. And not even thinking about, I did write the lyrics first. But not even thinking about the style in which I was going to sing it, how it was going to come out. Just like really attaching myself to the vulnerability that he must have had, Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., in the moment in his home where police came to his house and he didn't want to let them in, and just really thinking about like the levels of vulnerability, the levels of lost trust in him not wanting to let them in, and just really putting myself in that space. So I couldn't think about how I sounded, how it came across, how pretty it was. Just sing it. And I remember doing that. I probably did 2 takes, and there was so much that I wanted to change about it, but I said no, because that's exactly, that was probably the most authentic part of me recording it, and not really wanting to fix it, because it was nothing pretty about that moment. It's nothing pretty about any of these moments, and it wasn't my job to make it pretty. It was my job to just tell the story through the lyrics about vulnerability. And I'm so glad that we landed on the final project, because anybody that knows me knows I am a homebody. I love my home. I'm sure we all love the sanctity of our homes. And just thinking about this man being victimized and murdered in his safest place. And when we think about all the stories, that's where the hook came from, safe where, because we have a laundry list at this point of spaces and places where Black people are not safe. So yeah, that's how it all connected for me.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
But next, I want the setting the stage group. So that's Francesca, Julian, Jocelyn, who created these environments, right? For Francesca and Julian, it was more performative. For Jocelyn, it was, literally setting seats at the table for conversation. So I want to start with Francesca. I'm curious to know more about your interpreting movement through tragic events and occurrences, and how you really got into the work of translating the emotional weight of Ayana's story into physical movement.
For me, I'm driven by community and by collaboration. So it was really important, especially because we were holding Ayana so strongly, and honoring her. We started with the process. I basically sat down with the dancers, and we started with conversations around all that had transpired around the incident, around also the dancers and the collaborations and the performers that were getting ready to inhabit her story, around their opinions. So we really sat, we had dinners together, we watched footage from the courts. We really looked at the grandmother, who was a very big presence in Ayana's life, and her testimony in the courtroom was just one of the most powerful moments. So after these conversations, the dancers started to share, aspects of the characters that they started to develop. And then I worked closely with kind of developing those characters, and then as choreographer and a creative voice in kind of deciding which moments were important to portray, that were really would be honoring her and also calling out the injustice. So we also used different elements. Just in terms of different. It was interesting to hear some of the. I guess the Detroit SWAT is the reality show that the policeman was a part of, and there were like these advertisements that they would talk about, and they'd talk about what it means to them, and the juxtaposition between the tragedy and the loss and the almost entertainment value of these police officers wanting to be, I don't know, kind of wanting to acquire fame was so painful to inhabit and to live, but it became really important to everyone in the cast. And so we started that way with these conversations, and then started to develop like the movement score, and these moments that were really important that led to the actual shooting that we also inhabited and lived through. We felt it was very important to depict that and share that moment. And then, kind of the fallout and the moral and the ethics around the people and the circumstances, and also a plea to the audience and the people witnessing this moment, to really be deeply thoughtful about ethics around humanity. And I think this theme of erasure really was very present with us, this idea of not being seen, it not mattering, Black lives in that respect. And so that was also something that became an important exploration for us. Yeah, and I think for me, in the film, you also really see, like I said, The grandmother and Ayana, I mean, for me, that was, we held space for those two. And thinking about, that relationship that was so short-lived and tragically cut by the circumstances. So I think that's how we created the movement, and then it started to speak to us and started to feed us, and once you get in that kind of momentum, it starts to have this kind of organic process unfold. And that was really beautiful when we started to really feel that and know where we needed to go from one moment to the next, and what we wanted to really embed in the work.
Yeah, and also in your piece, you referenced other artists, but also you also collaborated with artists outside of dance. You referenced work by Carrie Mae Weems in your piece, and then you also had that beautiful sound music design by the Nona Hendrix, and I was like, you really know Nona Hendrix? Is she really gonna put? Come on now. You know we don't have budget for that.
Yes,
I know her.
When you all reached out, I was like, we gotta bring in the people if we can, And I mean, but the cause and the mission behind the work, there was no question for them, I mean, that's what we do, and
one more thing that I want to ask you, just individually about that work is, for me, I always saw the performance and the young woman who played the dancer interpreting Ayana. I always saw it as like the future self coming back for that reckoning. And I want to ask you, what does that imagined future say about memory, justice, and accountability? What could it say through art?
I mean, for me, it's this idea of, I think what we've struggled with for so many years is invisibility. So I think for me, the future self is really this being able to see people for their full selves and for their full existence. That for me really represents, the hope for Ayana and the hope for young Black women in the world. Is that people would start to envision her and us as fully, multidimensional, full-bodied human beings.
Yes, living human beings. We like to
living human beings.
That part.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Julian, for you, using sound as a tool for storytelling. For me, your project was one that your first pass on paper, I couldn't figure out all the pieces of I couldn't envision it. I just couldn't envision it. And then you said, bet,
Right.
let me just go ahead and produce this. Let me just show you. Let me let you hear what it is. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, okay. I'm curious to know, as this format, why you chose it, and how do you feel it honors or echoes or aids the amplification of Elijah's story?
I think in my space, in my medium, when we're working with sound, I really wanted to incorporate poetry, music, and then sound design, and kind of develop like a multi-layered space, so that like when we're like telling the story from these multiple like vantage points, because when these cases occur, you have a very like a reaction from not only the community, but the media, the police department, and then also like the victims' families. And for me, it was there's different symbolism involved. Like some are soulless spaces where it's like we're not dealing with human reaction, versus like a grieving mother who's actually in pain and actually hurt and like and grieving. So for me, I wanted to kind of like take poetry, scripted podcasting, music, and kind of find ways to kind of weave it all together into like one like unison story and storytelling format.
How did you approach building that world of the various, the layers with the character perspectives, the sound, the music? Was there one element that came first, or just walk us through how something like that gets scripted in your mind?
So like you said earlier, like definitely for me, like Leap was like a process. Like it definitely helped me understand like my creative process, and that's something like I never explored before. And I think working with Mercedes was like a great process that allowed me to kind of see myself as an artist and kind of actually like cultivate that like creative process in me. But for in this case, I kind of wanted to touch all the marks. So I took the mother, I took the interrogating police officers, I took the lawyers, the attorneys, and then the media, and then also the community with the protests. And then, finally, like with Elijah McClain's voice, I wanted to kind of, this is the only person in the scenario that's not able to speak. So for me, I kind of wanted to evoke like every different emotion, like a culmination of just different emotions. When like one injustice occurs, there's like multiple different vantage points. So for me, it was just important to capture like every angle of the spectrum. And then when you finish listening to it, you kind of come up with your own, I guess, you walk away with your like salute, your conclusion of it all at the end.
Because also one of the themes in your project, which is sort of how I see that tragedy occurring, it's like the weaponization of perception, right? Like the way in which that young man was perceived put the police officers in a place to use themselves as weapons for protecting who knows what in that incident. Can you talk a little bit about your connection? Because each of you, I feel in some ways, had personal connections to the cases or the people that you were creating art about. But can you talk a little bit about what that was for you?
For me, like I love that it was like I had like Elijah McClain. Like I feel very connected to Elijah in a lot of ways because I think like after I like was diving into his character, I was like I see a lot of myself in him. Like young, awkward. Like he was just listening to his music, being himself, going home. You know, leaving the store on like a casual night, and then he's just out of nowhere 911 call from a random person who we no longer know anymore, like he's nowhere to be found, led to his death, led to him being harassed by 3 officers that night. And for me it's just as like black men, it's just like kind of police are just given this power to kind of stigmatize us in a way where it's just like from a random phone call leading to somebody's death, that pipeline is just ridiculous to me. And for it to happen to him the way that it did, and for it to occur as often as it does in this country, I think I just feel connected to it because like he was me. He plays video games. He was just being himself, and you think you're free in this country until you get a phone call from 911, and now suddenly you're guilty of something that you don't even know what you did. So I really did feel connected to that aspect of it, where he loved his individuality so much.
All right, we'll come back, but I want to turn to Jocelyn Jackson. Culinary arts was like exciting, but it was also scary because we were like, what is that? What could it be? And so I think through your work, there were tons of metaphors. And so I would want to just start by asking you, how do you use, because you have a whole practice as well, that's not just like cooking, it's really community based, it's really history based. But I want to ask you how you use food and metaphor, food and memory, and metaphor to explore protection and service in this project.
That is a whole question, Mercedes, and I'm so grateful you ask it. And I need to reflect back to you in this moment how it is wonderful to be in this space of of each artist and specifically you as curator. Just the level of detail and recall you have in all these questions you're asking is just once again reminding me how much you care about this project and how deeply you researched and made sure that the connections were there. And so, I'll speak for myself, but there's just really, I wanted to step in to this experience as fully as I could. I wanted to immerse myself in this story so that I could do it justice and I could live up to the real positive expectation that you set for us. And I also wanted to bring, like Julian was saying, my whole self. And as artists, we are often, I'm going to say almost never one thing. We are multi-passionate, and we are able to bring, for me, for example, yes, you say culinary artist, which is true, but also quilter, also, so many things. And so I love that you gave us that opportunity too, to bring all the different, sort of the dynamism of how we can tell stories given our artistic and creative instincts. And that's what it felt like. It felt like channeling. It felt like, yes, this is a story of someone who I relate to because he was a cafeteria worker. He fed the kids. And as a co-founder of People's Kitchen Collective, one of our biggest inspirations is the Black Panther Party and that legacy of the free breakfast children. And making that connection was very easeful and heartbreaking. And to see not only that I could bring this tablescape, which was telling a story in itself just by the way that I set a table for Philando Castile and the officer that killed him to sit across from one another, these empty chairs, and my choice for the menu to be inspired, and I think this happened to many of the artists as well. It just happened that Philando's mom did an interview with Bon Appetit magazine, literally days before this project was coming together, and she shared Philando's favorite foods, and I was able to bring that spirit and that reality into the menu that I created. And like I said, my choice was for Philando's plate to be empty, and for this other plate, again, even the plates, Philando's plate was the warmth of wood, and the officer's plate was the coldness of metal. And the meal was served to that officer to make really clear the point that there is no one alive at Philando's side of the table to eat this meal and to appreciate, his mom's memories of the foods that he loved. What would it be for him to take that moment to engage with the humanity of Philando and his mother and her wishes for him and her care for him? And so really an incredible process of bringing all of our research to this, all our creativity to this, and to trust you all to make sure it was held with a lot of respect, because we had a little bit of a moment, Mercedes, of like, how do we capture this? How do we make sure that this is an archival piece when it is so fleeting? And so in your research, finding this technology that's usually used for real estate, it's called Matterport. Matterport technology, some of you are familiar, it's this incredible imaging that captures something in a full 360 perspective. So this table that I set, and all the small details, like the number of bullets were on the table, the blue line, the uniforms was on one side of the table, and the cafeteria blue smock was on the other. Like all the details were captured in this 360 degree imaging. And then I was able to make matter tags placed at every spot on that table to explain what each detail meant, including, on the officer's side, there was a stack of plates. Why is that stack of plates there? That stack of plates was engraved with the names of every juror, everyone who was complicit and a part of this decision, right? And so I love that someone come back to this experience of this tablescape, this story, and be able to drop in and get the information of why all these parts matter, why it was important for me to include those details at this table that was so fleeting, but important to be made permanent in some way. And, for us to have the recipes of all the food that was served at that meal and the meanings behind those recipes, for everyone to be able to take something away from it and make meaning from it and make sure that the story is something that can be shared. It was really a powerful experience, and I'm grateful that we found the ways for that to keep living on.
I want to ask you something else just about the theme of nourishment, because that is also really the foundation, as I see it, of the project, and how some people may not still grasp culinary arts, and it's sort of not maybe a thing, but maybe not a thing. But can you also just speak about how food as storytelling can reshape the narratives around justice, how you use it as something of nourishment and not something of deficit or lack, or like, what do we need to feed into ourselves? Talk about your thoughts around that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that nourishment goes to um, so many different things that we collect from our ancestors about. Maybe I'll summarize as what you feed grows, what you nourish grows, what you give attention becomes sacred. And I think food is very much that. It's an everlasting and universal platform for sharing truth and also sharing care. And like I said, as the People's Kitchen Collective has really dove into this idea of social practice, the way that we're able to say we're doing community meals that are of service to community is also an ability to do political education around the common intent behind Japanese internment and the Muslim ban. Like, that's what a plate of food can actually share and tell the story of, if we give it that power. And I really appreciate that, food and nourishment as a mode of art making has the power to give voice, because it is a very specific experience of I am receiving. I'm receiving this abundance and this care and this possibility of life. And along with it is what we call a recipe, and sometimes we call a love letter from our ancestors. What comes along with it is a flavor that is, specific to a continent or a region or a people's. There are layers of information that are transmitted through every given plate of food. And when we take it that seriously, the possibilities of nourishment are absolutely in the body, but it's absolutely in the mind as well. It's absolutely in the soul. And I love that we can really make sure that we're playing into that as the intention. When making these choices about, I want to make sure that this voice is heard on whatever topic. It can be gentrification. It can be home remedies. It can be so many things. But what is the possibility for us to use this habit, this practice of nourishing ourselves and others, and make it transcend what is usually accepted as a presumption, like, oh, it's an assumption that this will be something that's part of my daily life. It's not, especially when we take the care to tell the truth alongside of it. And, as an abolitionist, I'm very serious about that too, because I quite frankly think prison is lazy. I think that does not get to the heart of accountability. It really takes all of a community saying, this is how I was harmed, and this is the repair that I need. And for us to do that with so much nuance and so much ongoing attention, that's the real gift that we can give, especially when I'm thinking about this eternal table that I created for Philando and the officer that murdered him. You know, the opportunity is a daily one to make sure that, oh, this recipe that was used, I'm going to cook it again. I'm going to tell the story again. I'm going to make sure accountability is expressed yet again, so that we don't simply throw people or things away, hoping that's going to cure a systemic issue. Every day we practice accountability, just like every day we take whatever healing food we can into our bodies to make sure that we're living on purpose for our ancestors.
Delita, you're in my category where that I'm kind of framing as imagery and imagination. And with you, we didn't know what it was going to look like. Like yours is like the only project, because your practice is you don't sketch, you don't have. I mean, you wrote some stuff, and we were like, okay, but there's no concept sketch, there's no whatever. You're just like, no, I'm just gonna create. And you sent us photos along the way, and we're like, we could kind of see it. Is that a head or like? What is that going to be? But we had a lot of trust and faith. And so all these techniques that you're using in your work and these meanings, the meanings that are like embedded in, can you talk about sort of like the layering and, juxtaposed with sort of the complexity of this case, and what that might represent to you?
Yes. So it was, well, first of all, thank you so much for trusting me with the process. I don't do sketches. And so I was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to play over, but that's part of the process. But I really wanted to, when asked to complete this project, in reading about Yvette Smith's, the tragedy that took her life, I felt like it was important to tell the story, but also to change the viewer's perspective, or at the very least question the viewer's perspective. And so I wanted to, it was going to require layers, and it was going to require the visual language to tell the story. And so it was really one of those introspective times when I really had to sit with the story, which was really hard to do. But, I wanted to talk about Yvette Smith, tell her story, but also tell the story of what happens around this country time after time, day after day, minute after minute. And I wanted people to look at this one moment that is seemingly just an ordinary moment that could have happened in your life, my life, or anyone else's life, but it ended in tragedy. And it could happen to you. And that was what I wanted to bring in. So I started thinking about symbolism. So I brought in the cone flower to talk about unity in community, strength in community. I brought in the poppy flower to talk about death, and just the gesture and the upside down and backwards police flag to talk about a system that is clearly in distress. So I really use the visual language to tell the story of what happened and to talk about a moment that could have happened to any of us.
When people look at your mural, you're going to see a lot of bodies represented, and some are clear and some are less clear. What was your decision in how you represented sort of like all the people that were a part of telling Yvette Smith's story?
So I brought in her significant other and his son because I wanted to tell the complete story, because that's at the heart of what happened, what brought the situation to the conclusion that it did. The fact that, two people are having a disagreement the same as you and I might have with someone, and that disagreement led to a tragic death. But I wanted to walk the viewer through the story. So in the beginning, you see in the center, you see this two individuals, two males interacting with each other. And on either side, you have Yvette Smith. And I chose to mask her because in a lot of Black and brown cultures, the mask is a tradition, mask making and performances are tradition in the cultures. So I placed a mask on Yvette to represent Black and brown people and women around the world. But I unmasked the police officer because a lot of times you're watching the news and, you know, their information's not given. But I felt like, you know, this is something that should be known. So I unmasked him through the layers.
That mural is hanging now in Array, and so I think it took a year, if not 2 years, to actually come back to our office from Texas and also be like unpacked and hung. So it was 2 years into the after you had created it that I even saw it physically, and so it was just wonderful to like actually see it in person because you know you can look at the image online and it's beautiful, but when you see the sewing techniques in there, the painting techniques, the printmaking, you know, it's really wonderful and a lot larger and heavier than I thought it was. But it's beautiful. Okay, now Stephen, your project reimagines the candlelight vigil as confrontational rather than memorial. What inspired this transformation of a traditional form that we see a lot in Black and brown communities to honor lost lives? What inspired this transformation into the call for accountability that you created in your work?
That's a really interesting question. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to communicate in this project, and also, I mean, shout outs to Ava and the team for really challenging me, especially when it came to the visual motifs of figuring out what's the best way to communicate it. I remember at first I was thinking that since I know that the Amadou Diallo incident started over, pretty much over a wallet, you know, I was first thinking that maybe the visual representation of, you know, the 41 shots would have to do with something along the lines of, you know, maybe they could be shown with wallets. But, you know, Ava challenged me and said, like, what's something that would be, I'm paraphrasing for sure, but it was something along the lines of what would be something that would just be more kind of not only profound, but something that just would be resonates with you a little bit more deeply, if you will. And, you know, growing up in Brooklyn and it's just pretty much in all communities in so many different ways and shapes and forms, you know, every time that, you know, you see someone pass away in the hood, this usually comes along with the candlelight vigil. And then it's usually, you know, something that, you know, it's something that's really respectful. And at the same time, it's something that brings awareness to, you know, the person that passed away. So one thing that I really thought that would stand out in the project like this is not only to, you know, still hold the vigil for Diallo and his family and what that represented for the community and what his loss represented, but also shedding light to the brutality that the police showed. So having those candles is like this weird kind of juxtaposition to not only, you know, shed light, if you will, on the situation and pay reference, but also to still bring accountability and awareness to how many shots each of these officers were taking, and then also placing those candles in the neighborhoods where those officers were to be residing at.
How do you see symbolism functioning in your storytelling? Is it for remembrance, indictment, or both?
I think one of the things that I find really striking with the way that I wanted to perceive my visual storytelling is always showing the juxtaposition and the duality of situations and how not only visual motifs but meanings of things can be a double-edged sword, if you will. And when it came to the 41 candles, the first representations of it is so layered, you know, being able to have the 41 candle vigil at, you know, in front of his memorial in the Bronx, you know, that's something that took the tone of paying reverence and remembrance, and also, that same kind of duality of showing like this is how many times that the cop shot at him, and then at the same time being able to bring those candles in different situations, where whether it was in front of the police precinct, or whether it was in the neighborhoods in Long Island, or the neighborhoods in Park Slope, it was still being able to not only bring awareness to, like, someone being able to pass away, but also bringing the awareness of the duality of it. If these officers or these people live in this area, you should be aware of this as well too. That not only did Amadou Diallo passed away in a very aggressive way, in a very brutal way, but also that these were the cops that were behind it, and then this is how much they participated.
So I want to ask Reggie, you were sort of my cohort of visual language
Yeah,
artists, I would
yeah.
say, is where I would put you. Kind of, both with the kind of culmination book, but then also with the style of art that you practice. So one of the things that I kind of, because that is a form that you work in, and so can you talk about the power of topography to shape language and to communicate, messages, particularly in this case of like justice or
Yeah.
accountability or things of that nature, or just in your general practice?
I mean, as everyone has said, thank you, man. Like I said, I can't believe 5 years has zoomed by. So this is fire to be here tonight. When I think about like typography and public messaging, I mean, you can trace it back something. So I work from an analog to digital process. A lot of people think I make fonts. I don't. I mean, a lot of people think I just use fonts. I don't. Like every hand typography, alphabet, letter that comes from my hand to an identity system to a billboard to whatever it is, I'm literally sitting at this exact table or some table around the world with blank pieces of paper, sumi ink, calligraphy nibs, and I'm just trying to figure out like how to find beauty and perfection. And I think when we when you all reached out, I was like, oh, like one of my dreams honestly has always to create a billboard, because I think you can trace like public messaging back to the hair salon for black people. You could trace it back to the Green Book. You could on a smaller scale, right? And so I always looked at language and words. First and foremost, I never really looked at like words as art. I always thought you had to be in like a studio and painting, with an abstract paint. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, if we're not crafting imagination with language, then what is? And so taking this analog to digital approach, looking at where we were at that time in the world and seeing all of us having to experience these analog experiences in respective cities in a digital form, on the news, on social media. It became overwhelming and overbearing. And so when we started working on my project, I was like, well, we went back and forth. I was like, let's just strip it down to black and white and really create bold visual languages of very thought-provoking and uncomfortable quotes for a lot of people that they had to confront, because we were dealing with several pandemics at one time. You know what I mean? And it was unfortunate, but I think at that moment there was some sort of shocks that needed to be had, and language and words and typography, because we also don't see a lot of black people working in this space. So I thought that was important too. And so I just tried to like bring all of that to the table. There was a quote, I mean, I lived by it, but more specifically then, like art must reflect the times by Nina Simone, right? Like, and when we were working on it, I was like, man, well, if you're gonna say something, you gotta say something that means something for this moment. Being a black man in this country, that could have been me, that could have been my cousins, that could have been my brother. It is, and so just making sure that I did what I could do to contribute to them.
And yours was a project that unfortunately we were like, hurry up and wait, because I think when we contacted you, we were slightly coming out of the pandemic. It was like summer, I
Yeah,
think 2021.
yeah.
People were kind of feeling good,
But
might want to be out. So we were like, bam, we're gonna have this big event. We need an artist. We're gonna do this thing. We have this plan to have all these chairs, make a statement.
uh,
And then so it was like, we need this, Reggie, and like like yesterday, please draw faster.
Like
Pretty much.
work
So sorry.
faster. That's all
Yeah,
good.
and then
Yeah, yeah,
and then the
yeah.
event didn't even happen because people weren't as comfortable. So we got 247 chairs, sitting in storage somewhere with the statements
And
on
then
them.
LA was like, "No, we're not ready to have. We're
You're
not
not
ready."
ready. But, that created a beautiful opportunity because
Mhm,
your project has been one of the most, I don't know, I don't want to say transferable, but kind of like
mhm.
transferable. And
Yeah.
also, so one that we use often because those chairs, I still pull those chairs out for
Mhm,
events here on Array's Creative Campus. And people
mhm,
are like, what is this? We
mhm,
have gobos, lights around Array's
mhm,
campus where you're projected. Anyone,
mhm,
someone special comes here, put up the
mhm,
Reggie, put up the Reggie lights, and then also we have that beautiful billboard moment as
mhm.
well with it on. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and you sort of talked about this, but if you could expand on your thoughts, do
Yeah.
you see your type work more as image, as text, both? Like,
Mhm.
what is it to you?
I think you hit it on the nail. For me, I if there was a genre, I don't know if it is or not, but I think my art falls into more accessible art because I think public messaging has this beautiful notion to constantly be used, transferred, applied in different mediums. That's what got me into typography. Like I always wanted to be a graffiti writer, but I didn't want to get locked up from like painting on walls or whatever, right? Like and when I looked at how far messaging could travel, if it can go on the chair, if it can go on the airplane, if it can go on the billboard, I started thinking about what I could create for the world that stick, although you do it once, it has like the length to continue to empower and impact and move forward. And so I think that was sort of the beautiful part of the project when we started diving into the various applications and what the typography could go on and what the messaging can go on. That's when it started to create this like octopus effect and had these like verticals of imagination that was really exciting. I hope I answered the question, or I'm in the neighborhood of it. I hope.
Yes, you're genreless is what I heard.
Um,
Um,
nah, it's typography. I think
okay.
I love repetition. I love public messaging.
Mm.
I wouldn't say
But
that
it's
I'm
both. It's both text and image.
yeah, because I think you have to be able to I think an image is something that's striking in an instant moment, and I think typography does the same thing.
I'm curious to know from all of you, did your projects change your relationship to your own practice or anything that you created after the fact?
I think as a writer, this really just enhanced my relationship to revision and being more open to however many revisions it takes to make sure the message is clear and as emotive as it needs to be to reach the audience that it needs to reach. And as we were going through like the film, there was a few times where we sent it back and forth, and they just allowed me to be more comfortable with not this idea of perfection, but this idea of having integrity in the work.
I think for me, I it allowed me to envision my work in the public arena more, doing more work in public arts, having an even greater statement regarding what's things that are happening around the world today.
I think for me, it reminds me to always create with intentionality. And, like Jocelyn said earlier, it reminded me to always come as my whole self, my full self. And, like I have a voice, there's a place for me to be uniquely me. And, I think that's what this process always reminds me like to do and continue on moving forward in my journey.
This was a challenging process, all right? Let's acknowledge that. We didn't have a lot of time. Some we would have liked maybe more budget. Some it was a just the issues alone. What we were working towards was like, who wants to? Don't we just want to be on our couch watching streaming movies? I do. So I know that I challenged you, Maybe I was a little demanding at times. I don't know. You tell me. But talk about that, because I think the other thing is that once again, you are all working in a bubble. You also were working as commissioned artists, so it wasn't like you were creating projects on your own where you're just like, okay, I can maybe be on my own timeline or explore my own subject matter or find it when I find it. We had timelines, we had deadlines, we had, sort of some points that we needed the projects to hit. And so, I know, but for the viewers who may not know, talk a little bit about what that process was for you.
It was difficult because of the subject matter itself, to have to sit with that day in and day out. As an artist, my own practice, I don't create anything that I can't connect to, because I can't give it justice if I don't. So I had to sit with that story. I had to do the research. I had to watch the videos. I had to listen to the news. And at the same time, you're in the middle of a pandemic, and we all suffered losses and other tragedies during that time. So to compartmentalize life itself, what's happening, the isolation, and then to take on the challenges of the emotional challenges of this project was very difficult, very, very difficult.
I think I think you hit it on the opening question, Mercedes. I think it was the rigor of the speed. For me, it was the compartmentalization, right? Like we were all in our respective homes somewhere across this country, experiencing all of these various pandemics in real time in our neighborhoods. We had family members, and then most artists, we have this luxury to dream up a project like, oh, I want to explore and walk down this avenue of this type of medium or that type of medium, but to be directed in a topic that hits each and every one of us in the gut, and then put time on it, and then it's like emotionally draining. That was the And then it's like, oh, the revision part. Most artists that work in the studio, you can go free form and tell the collectors or whoever you do, well, this is what it is. This wasn't that project. It was almost like writing an essay, if you will, because there was the revision, the drafts, the constant back and forth of communicating a final idea to something that was really gut punching and emotionally heartbreaking. And so I think it was like, for me, it was like, how do I drag my letters across the page, but also how do I drag myself across the finish line to get this project done, knowing that every single person, mostly every single person, was a brother that looked like me, and it's like, man, I gotta work towards this, but also I gotta like, at the same time, there's a mirror up that's like, man, I am him, and so it was this constant back and forth of working in the middle of chaos. That was really the challenging part.
First, buying all those candles. Buying those candles was definitely something. And also, like, shout outs to my friends. I have a really strong, solid group of friends I would consider as family. Growing up in New York, you don't really have a car like that. Well, I don't have a car. So being able for them to drive me out to the different locations, especially when it came out to Long Island, in the precinct, that was extremely clutch as well too. So, and it became something like in this beautiful in a beautiful way. It became more of a, not only did I know that I was responsible for taking on this project, but being able to work with, like I was saying, like family, if you will, on this, it gives more connectivity to it too. It was like, because all of us are born and raised in New York as well too, and being able to connect with them on that level logistically, no, it was really powerful, to be honest. The story itself, of Amadou Diallo, it's heavy, and it's something that was, especially with the way that I care about my work, I really want to put a lot of love and intent, and also have a level of awareness to not only the situation, but also to the families that were affected by this as well too. So that is a lot of, that is not only like just the emotional toll that it takes, and just kind of like going through that and being in those areas, and just kind of like losing yourself in those moments of just trying to just kind of replaying it in your head and just seeing how that went through. It's just something that it is hard. But it was something that I truly, that's why I wanted to have the level of the candlelight vigils, for it to be like this is something that we all should be grieving for. It's something that we always mourn. It's pretty much every time that happens to any other human, there is a level of grief and mourning and empathy that's involved with it. So I just wanted to make sure that I did it justice and was able to shed light on it in a way that is not only still honest, but also still warm and heartfelt, because it was something that it definitely does take a toll on you in some way. It's impossible with a work like this.
As we say, we talk about all of the challenging moments. The opportunity to be that as courageous was just like no other. I mean, the momentum of that, like, even when it was hard, for me, it just also was nourishing in that way, the whole process. And even in the revisions, like, I was learning from you all, like the masters with film, just for me, it was like, that also fed me in certain ways, just artistically, that I thought was just, what a great kind of collaborative process, that for me also just, although challenging, gave as much in so many respects.
I think it's also important to note that this felt like an equitable artistic exchange. I do want to speak on having been able to receive the money that LEAP, granted us to do the artistic practice to the highest level possible. And because of the funds, it did allow it allowed me to dream bigger, and it allowed me to extend a different amount of care. And that's why I was like, "Hey, Mercedes, let's do this thing." And y'all were like, "Well, at the time," I'm like, "No, I want to honor the work." And I was just so grateful to have the opportunity to know what it felt like to engage in an artistic practice seriously and be serious about the business of it and the ethics of it. And to be able to also pay the people who work with me and to feel like I was compensated fairly. So thank you for that part too. It was an equitable exchange.
Mercedes, can I just share something with you? Because I don't think I told you this, but for me, just piggybacking on what everybody else said, I didn't find urgency in the deadline. I just found urgency in the importance of saying the thing. And I remember you telling me in the process of writing the song that I had to say the officer's name, and that did not sit well with me. I was like, I do not want to sing this name. And we did that. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but Mr. Chamberlain's son reached out to me on Instagram. And that is the first thing he said. He said, I'm so glad that you said the officer's name. And that is when it really stuck with me, like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're calling out these names for accountability so that they can no longer hide behind the veil that protects them. And I just think that was so important.
That was the most important thing to Ava. She said that is what must be done for each and every project in some way, is to have visibility of the names of the officers, because the story that we've been told, the headlines that we read, are always the victim. And, that also is the story we want to tell, right? We want to uplift, we want to honor the names of our loved ones who we've lost, right, through these tragedies. But at the same time, that invisibility, that hallway where they can hide, where the officers can hide in, is why there's that lack of accountability, right? We don't know their names. We can't say them. We can't point them out on the streets as we're passing them by and say, hey, you don't kill people. We can't do that unless we know their names. And so that was the thing. And, for some projects are the faces, in terms of the visual works, like the photography and the mural. But that was really like the key component, is how do we weave it in and also make it feel like it's, not just like a little sticker that you put on to it, but that it's part of the project. So yeah, I know that was a challenge, but y'all did it. Thank you. The results are there. And then I just have like two more questions I think that I want to pull from. Um, I mean, some of this we've already talked about, but um, I guess I just want to talk about visioning the future and preservation. One of the reasons why, uh, we wanted to, well, so just going back to the need of urgency in that moment, Rare, you're absolutely right. It felt so urgent to Ava, to all of us at Array, that we should be using artistic voices, right, to call for this change that we want to happen in our society. And we feel that's a really, that's something that that many people can do in many different ways. But now reflecting back of how urgent that moment felt, one thing that does saddens me is 5 years later, how, we're not hearing the reports as much. A lot of these police officers still, there is no accountability for them. They are still, now some trials have happened, some things have happened, but for most of the stuff, especially when we look at the over 200 names just in 2020 alone of lives taken, you know what I mean? We could work the rest of our lives, right, trying to rectify what we've lost. And so it saddens me now that it's not still, even with everything else that's going in the world, yes, everything feels so hard and urgent sometimes, but this issue still exists, right? And so that's another reason why we wanted to gather everyone here to just reflect on that moment of urgency when it was being covered by the media, where people were talking about it, where we felt like people hadn't moved on. And so I want to talk about envisioning the future, preservation. Our ninth commission encompasses all. It's an archive, it's a time capsule of all of your work. I'll send you a link on the side, but really, publishers, please holler, because the intention that was put into development of that book was so high level, every aspect of it. Digitally, it's beautiful, but the intended print version with the paper selection, the cover, everything that Polymode picked out for that book was so intentional. It's also very costly to produce. And so we are balancing sort of the realistic nature of bringing that to the public, which I hope one day it does go to press. And we're working on that. But just the idea of what was created to gather and, like I said, have all of your artwork into conversation is a preservation, that I think is a little bit different than having digital archives of the work, is that printed form. And so that was a long setup just to ask you all this one question is, what do you hope lives on from this work? And part two to that is, what would justice look like? What would justice feel like, not just look like, in your work and the world in the future?
I think the baseline for justice is just a higher sense of emotional intelligence and empathy that's just needed in general. There's a lot of things that can be solved with just cooler heads prevailing and people being loving and just actually empathetic towards everyone, the full spectrum of humanity, and just with the world in general. I think there is, maybe that's just like the hippie in me, and then maybe I might have hugged way too many trees in my life, but I feel like that baseline is just what I think justice is. Justice is just starting from that baseline of just being able to love and empathize and just truly see someone for who they are, and then loving that person for that. And then if we can start really establishing that on a more of a baseline respect level, I feel that we can start getting into the other layers of justice, because I just do think that is ever so lost in this world, more so than people are aware of sometimes.
I think what you said about, calling out the officer's name, I remember having, that to add that element into the work because I basically wanted to honor Ayana and her grandmother, and that that kind of almost uh, what is the word, challenging aspect to the work just was very liberating in a way. And I do feel like now, especially for accountability and ethics in art, um, that aspect and having, experienced that and called out the truth in the work and to have been that courageous is something I hope to keep moving forward, to keep in my practice moving forward. I had it, but I think it was, maybe clouded in creativity in a lot of ways. And just to be that direct in the work, it was just so empowering and powerful. And for the people watching, I think, and experiencing it, very liberating.
Something that comes to mind that tags onto the accountability of the officers' names. For me, working in typography and letters and messaging and public messaging, this country is obsessed with stats, right? Like we love how many grants we give away, we love how many jobs, we love interest rates on housing, but in this particular topic, everybody shies away. And I think for me, in the various projects that I'm working on, is representation of those stats, whatever it is, right? Like there's X amount of black people working in this industry. There's and typically those numbers are low, right? Like because we glorify the other numbers. It's like, oh well, you guys are excelling in here, or there's other things. And so for me, it's like ensuring that I can continue to use public messaging to amplify statistics and also tip the scale on misrepresentation in every industry as well, or whatever industry that you find yourself working in.
For me, I think the artist or the creative voice is more important now than it ever has been before. Our the news media is being cut off. You're not seeing what we should be seeing documented in the news or in the newspaper, even or even written. And we have a unique opportunity as creatives to record what's actually happening in the world today. So, my plan is to continue to do that, but also to support other artists in their efforts to do that as well. Um, this is our voice, and we collectively need to have it heard.
Absolutely, that Delita. Thank you for that. And I, when it comes to preservation, when it comes to the feeling of justice, I have to say that we are living in a country and in a world that is presently co-signing genocide. Like that's where we are as a baseline of what's acceptable amongst human beings right now. And that is beyond heartbreak into this place of disgust, into this place of just, it's intolerable to stand to meet that reality every day. And as artists, how we bring our voice to that is essential, just as it has been for this ongoing exercise of brutality within our own country when it comes to police murdering black folks. And I want to say that, one of the most incredible images of the reality of what we are tolerating when it comes to this genocide, specifically in Palestine, let alone in Congo or Sudan or Haiti, it's this group that brought children's clothing and laid it hand to hand on the beach outside of Gaza. And the amount of small outfits that were on this beach were the number of children's lives that have been lost, right? And I want to make sure I'm not using the word lost, the lives that have been taken, and the enormity of that visual of more than 10,000 children being killed in these last 600 days. That's what we do as people that see what's happening in the world. We try our hardest to make it visible. We try our hardest to make what we do tell the story in a way that it can be seen and felt at the same time. And one of the instincts I had when I did my project was for Leap, as I was dreaming possibilities, was do I need to devote a few, and by a few, I mean many years of my life making a table for every single person who's been lost? And again, I use that word because they're lost to my spirit, but they've been taken from this world. And what is it that we can do to make sure that that is never forgotten? It's never released as something that is simply what happens. It is a daily reality that is always present to us in ways that are, as we've been saying, this word tragic, but also in the beauty that each of us brings to the world. Like I want a lullaby for everyone, Rory. Like I have that craving for when I'm seeing the past, present, and future stories that we know are going to happen. We have this beauty that we've put into the world to recognize it and to uplift it and to name both the things that are hard and also the things that are necessary for us to stay in the world on purpose and not, be in the spiral of decline that could easily happen given our realities.
I think for me, thanks to social media, I think we've been able to connect the dots and realize that Black and brown people are under attack on a global scale, not just a national scale. And, not just with police injustices, like Jocelyn was saying, with what's going on in Gaza and across the world. And for me, I just think, police injustices is just the Americanized, branded version of it. Just an excuse to kill Black and brown people. And we are, like Reggie was saying, we're marginalized across all industries in so many ways. So with my artistry moving forward, my goal is to really just, fight the censorship that we have to endure as artists, where we're not really able to authentically express ourselves and try to fit into a mold, an acceptable mode of what it means to be an activist, or what it means to be Black, or what it means to be, any of these things. Like, we should be able to define it. And now that the stories aren't being covered on the news, I don't think this should be treated like a trending topic, and it's still very relevant today. I think the narrative has just shifted, and I think people are ready for the bigger conversation that this isn't just a police injustice. This is an attack. This is a human rights issue on a global scale. So I think moving forward, I think the conversations are only going to get bigger. And I think through all of our artistry, we need to just be more impactful and more intentional.
I think for me, one of the things that has been so important for me is just being really intentional about how I take information in and dwelling in a community of artists and feeding off of their expressions. And even with this project, just doing a deep dive on the work that you all represent and being inspired by that to move forward in anything that I do going forward. So just really being intentional about, because there's just so much information, there's so many lies, and it's just, what do we take in? How do you react? How do you participate? And I think we just really need to take a breath and figure out what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, but also getting that messaging from like-minded individuals in the community, artists who are going to tell the truth.
Yeah, and I have nothing new or enlightening to say that they haven't said, but just to continue to be amongst the cloud of witnesses. I think that's the most important thing, and to continue to speak clearly the names of the forces that try to eradicate us. I live in Atlanta, where Cop City is being built, and that is directly connected to what's happening in Gaza with the IDF soldiers. And so I think I implore everyone just to pay attention, to organize, to be in community, and to know that community can also support and uplift you. And that's how we change systems, and that's how we reimagine things. We are not alone, but we must talk to each other.
Well, y'all are beautiful. I care very deeply about each and every one of these projects. Like I said, one of the greatest gifts that I didn't know to ask for. I've learned so much about myself in learning your processes and how to work, how to be in community, how to lead, how to express and communicate better. I think I've definitely improved upon my communication skills in 5 years. I will say, pat on the back for me. But just also, it gave me the opportunity to work outside of film and really and really delve into the process of storytelling across all different forms. So, once again, this journey where these projects live and sit and shift, I don't know where they'll be, 5 years from now or when I'm older and grayer. But I know that they'll always live here and here with me. And I just really thank y'all, really, for once again just answering the call and creating with such grace, such intentionality, such urgency. You all were definitely all chosen for a reason. There's only 9 of you. I think initially we were going to do 25 artists in 1 year. Ugh. But y'all were the chosen 9. So I appreciate y'all. And I just really have been also seeing everything that you're doing now, books and retrospectives and buying grandmama's home and making it into a gallery and creating online digital creation studios and creating and curating dinner experiences for the masses. And it's just beautiful. It's what you would have been doing anyway. I know it. But the fact that Leap is part of that journey and Array is part of that journey just makes it all the more beautiful for me to watch. So we'll be watching for you. Thank you. And I just want to say for the viewers, because this was a conversation for me, but obviously acknowledging that other people will be watching it. If you have not seen any of these projects, experienced these projects, watched, listened, read through these projects, please, I implore you, go to leapaction.com. They're all there. I think mostly in totality, except for perhaps the book. But the conversation continues, and we hope that you will continue to have it with us. So thank you.